Oven roasted turkey stacks high on hearty multigrain smeared with smashed avocado and drizzled with the pecan chipotle sauce. Tuck into new subs to savor at Subway. Eat fresh.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Good afternoon. Here we are again on Tall Tales, starting out with a respectful reading of the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. I wouldn't mind reading the whole thing from the beginning to the end. To me, it's one of the greatest works that mankind has ever reduced to writing. But we do a token representation of the U.S. Constitution by respectfully reading the Second Amendment every time we get together for these little online chautauquas. So let's proceed directly to Zemi Ikotny. You'll recall that Zemi Ikotny is my backwards play on words. The literal translation is press the meat. I turn that around and it becomes meet the press. Sometimes with the subtitle, eat your heart out, Chuck Todd, because mine is so much better than yours. So on Meet the Press, what I do, as you were on Zemi Ikotny, what I do is I examine the editorial renderings on each of the editorial pages, so-called, of our daily newspapers, mark them up, correct them, make notes on them, criticize them unmercifully, and if one is the better, it receives the coveted blue star, with the caveat that the blue star never goes by default. In order to achieve the blue star rank, an editorial must meet my exceedingly high standards. If it were to go by default, the Daily News would get it every day, because over at the Post, I've been on strike for about a month now. No more editorials from the Post. We did get a letter from the editor, from the owner, though. Maybe that counts.
Kinda. You snuck it in.
Yeah. All right. I'm just having a little trouble with my Facebook here, Jose. I know it's up there, but I hate Facebook. The way they make everything so hard, you know? And I suppose it's my inherent sense of Ned Ludd, but I hate to spend 2 hours in learning how to do something that will save me 5 seconds every day. And that's the way Facebook tends to be. And YouTube is not a whole lot better. I tried to pick up YouTube because it was suggested to me that I might want to monitor YouTube for the comments, but it's very difficult to get YouTube. Yesterday's YouTube, I can just pick up like nothing. And then when I get there, I post a comment, but I don't know if anybody else ever does. Do you ever look at YouTube?
Every now and then.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we are on YouTube and we are on Facebook.
Yeah, I picked it up a couple days ago, but I can't get on there today. I got yesterday's just as clear as a bell, but I can't pick up today's. And once again, it's one of those things, well, in order to do that, you have to click on the vertical ding-ding bar and then download the XYZ and pull that into this, you know. It's really simple. It's only a 15-step process. And it works every time.
You forgot the 4 UPC codes you got to submit.
Exactly, yeah. All right, so here we are in Tall Tales. Let's take a look at the Daily News' editorial today. Our view, federal government should change cannabis banking laws. Well, I hate to be such a English teacher reincarnated, but the federal government doesn't change laws. that would be the United States Congress that changes laws, not the federal government. And I know it's so easy and so popular. Well, you know, the federal government, blah, blah, blah. First of all, I don't even like to use the term federal government because we don't have one anymore. And when the country was created, that was the idea, that we would have a federal government. We'd have independent, subordinate sovereigns called states, each of which had delegated some of their sovereignty to a central government, a limited amount, to accomplish the things that a nation needed to accomplish rather than a conglomeration of states. But evil forces have been working since the founding of the country to turn that federation into a unitary national government. And unfortunately, they've been pretty successful with the assistance of the Supreme Court going along. So here's today's editorial. The banking problem facing Guam's emerging cannabis industry. Now, cannabis is the same thing as marijuana. So I'm going to do the same thing here that I've done with COVID-19. It's really the Wuhan virus. And it kind of comes from the same page of the book that says, don't talk about being pro-abortion, because that doesn't sound right. Abortion doesn't have a very nice context. So just represent you and your group as being pro-choice. Who could be against being pro-choice? And it's the same way with marijuana. Cannabis sounds so much more genteel than marijuana. But anyhow, the banking problem facing Guam's emerging marijuana industry raises serious questions that other communities have been dealing with since marijuana first became legal. Under the federal, and unfortunately, the Daily News has got it. Under the federal law, marijuana is still classified as a Schedule I controlled substance. That means it's listed along with LSD and heroin as a drug with no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. I'm going to stop right there. No currently accepted medical use. Well, I hear a lot. And I know we jumped hard to bring about medical marijuana here. But in retrospect, that was just a stalking horse. It's much easier to
switch as well.
Yeah, it's much easier to sell medical marijuana. Well, you know, there are old people that can't tolerate pain, and marijuana makes their life much easier. And, you know, for people that can't develop an appetite, it really helps. So we want marijuana, legal, medicinal marijuana to be legal. And, you know, we got all fired up about that and then decided, well, that's too hard. We'll just go with recreational marijuana, and the medicinal uses can be pulled out of that. Much easier. But marijuana is still marijuana. Now, if there is an accepted medical use, this is what I would recommend, and I've said this over and over again. Take it off Schedule I and find out if there really are medical uses for it. Now, I see CBD. I can't go on my iPad without seeing 4 advertisements for CBD every day. I don't know what snake they extract CBD from, but I've seen the snake oil advertisements before. You younger fellas wouldn't remember this, but back around 1950, 51 or so, there was this magical elixir called Hadacol. It came in a very medicinal-looking brown bottle, a pint bottle. It was relatively inexpensive, and it was trumpeted to cure everything from chronic dandruff to fallen arches. And it turned out that Hadacol was about 30% alcohol. So no question about it, you took some Hadacol and you would feel better because of it. And I got a feeling that this medicinal marijuana is the same thing. CBD, I think, is just capitalizing on the marijuana reputation. Going on with the editorial. Under federal law, marijuana is still classified as a Schedule I controlled substance. That means it's listed along with LSD and heroin as a drug with no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. Does it have a high potential for abuse? The potential is so high that state governments will go to great lengths to legalize it, even though it's against federal law, to sort of legitimatize their habits, is what you got. Because it's illegal under federal law, many banks are hesitant to accept money from marijuana-related businesses, and that creates a serious problem for cannabis businesses. Essentially, it forces growers, processors, and sellers to conduct cash-only businesses. Haven't they been doing that anyhow? That's a dangerous situation for many businesses, leading to financial and physical risk for workers and investors. According to Guam Cannabis Control Board member Adrian Cruz, who was in charge of, if my memory serves me correctly, he was in charge of the subcommittee dealing with manure on the Cannabis Control Board. Does that remember that, Jose? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wafting.
Yeah. The problem also extends to tax collections. The Department of Revenue Taxation won't be able to store any tax money collected without a bank to accept money from cannabis businesses, marijuana businesses. Guam officials are researching how the problem has been handled in other jurisdictions. Well, you might check with Colombia, Venezuela, Mexico. Yeah, they don't seem to have any problem dealing with large amounts of cash at all.
Lots of good cash flow going.
There you go. Rev Tax Director Daphne Shimizu said the Insurance and Banking Commission in Hawaii used a third-party vendor, a bank in Colorado, to handle the processing of payments for Hawaii's medicinal cannabis industry. The problem could be resolved with federal passage of the Safe Banking Act, which generally prohibits a federal banking regulator from penalizing a depository institution for providing banking services to a legitimate cannabis-related business, with the emphasis on the word legitimate. Well, the bill states that earnings from illegal drug activity are still subject to anti-money laundering laws. Proceeds from a transaction involving activities of legitimate cannabis-related businesses are not considered proceeds from unlawful activity. The proposal has passed in the U.S. House of Representatives several times. Now, here's a good example of the media tilting the table. Listen to this sentence. The proposal has passed in the U.S. House of Representatives several times, but it has been blocked in the Senate. Now, who would do a thing? Who blocked it in the Senate? What's the difference between saying the proposal has passed the House of Representatives several times, but has not passed the Senate? Wouldn't that be correct? But when you read the word blocked, you know, that adds somebody's thought process, somebody's bias to the editorial here. Boo, Daily News. With marijuana legal for either medicinal or recreational use in most of the country, senators need to realize that whether they personally like it or not, cannabis is an industry.
So is meth.
Yeah. So is what?
So is meth.
Yeah, so is meth, so is heroin. Yeah, I don't like it, but I got to realize it's a business. Yeah.
I mean, I understand people's opinions, but stating that it's an industry doesn't change anything.
No, it doesn't. Not a thing. States and territories should not have to cobble together plans to bypass federal regulators. Now, I agree with that 100%. They shouldn't have to cobble plans to bypass federal. They just shouldn't do it. It's time to make federal regulations match the needs of the people they serve. Oh, boy. No Blue Star Today post. Daily News. Now, there's more to this story, and I have it right here. It's on the card, but I'm going to accelerate it to the Demi-Cotney part of the agenda. I got somebody hanging on the line here. Let me see who it is. Dr. Ron McNinch. Well, I'll let Dr. Ron McNinch in, and then I'll go to the rest of the story. As Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story. Go ahead, Ron.
Hey, Happy Day, Senator. Happy Day, Guam. I was thinking, I think they might need to send a bunch of people off island to go on a trip to find out how to handle money like that.
Yeah, sounds like a good idea, Ron. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that has to be part of the policy-making process.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And, go ahead.
Go after you.
Well, also, the federal law is pretty dang clear on, what's legal and what's not. And the difference, in my opinion, between Guam and a lot of other jurisdictions is we have no borders. There's only one, or actually two ways that stuff can get here. It can come by air, it can come by sea, and both of those are regulated by the federal government. And so, I'm not sure if they gave a lot of thought and consideration to these points before they passed this law, because both modes of transport are under the federal under the watch of federal officials.
Well, I like to start out, instead of starting out with a result and working backward and developing the justification as I go, I like to start out at the beginning and try to find some principles that fit into my philosophy of the way government and society ought to operate. And one of the principles that I am fond of is that we must try to prevent anarchy at every turn. Now, I like freedom, I like individual choice, etc. But once the government has decided that something is illegal, and we go ahead and thumb our nose at it, we are starting down the slippery slope of anarchy. So now we've got two anarchy cells here on the island, cockfighting and marijuana, both of which with one type of seal of approval or another from our local government. So if you don't have to disobey laws that you don't like, then you get to decide which laws really count. If you don't like them, you don't have to obey. That's kind of one of my basic principles, Ron.
Right. I think, though, that there has to be some regulation point. I don't know what that point is. There has to be some point where someone enforces these things.
Well, laws on the books that aren't enforced tend to make a mockery of all laws. That's the other side
Right.
of it, and we're heading for, and that's the back door to anarchy.
Right. And it's kind of like it reminds me of what went on in, I guess, all over the Northwest a couple of years ago, when we had, the people running around burning everything, and there was absolutely no regulation. There was no way of putting a check on any of their bad behavior. And the governors of those various jurisdictions just let it go and said, too bad, that's the way things are.
Or in some cases, actually celebrated. Maybe we'll have a summer of love, she said.
Right. And they even, abandoned their duties totally. I don't know. There has to be some way to deal with leaders who act like that.
Well, we kick them out every 2 or 4 years, and the Wampat Den 10 found that out the hard way.
Right. Yeah. Okay, sir. Well, I think they need to take a trip. That was my bottom line.
Good point, Ryan. Anything this important requires a junket. Oh, did I say junket? I meant fact-finding journey.
Oh, yeah.
Good talking to you, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if we think that we have problems with little arcade robberies now, wait until these places start having loads of money in their back rooms.
True enough. Yeah, it would make the game rooms look like slim pickings compared. Yeah. Good point, Ryan.
Hey, have a great day, sir.
So
Thank
long.
you.
Let's take a short break, and we'll come back and spend a little more time with marijuana.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Attention tailgaters. It's time for you to get a new tail to gate on. It's a fact. They got a 2021 model clearance going on all kinds of your favorite Nissan models, the Rogue Sport, Kicks, Murano, Titan, and they've all got great FM radios so that you can pick up tall tails in the afternoon. 0% APR, or your first 3 payments are on Nissan. Zero down magic tailgaters. Learn more by visiting NissanGuam.com.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY. Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
Okay, well, continuing the marijuana dialogue here, I noticed that Richard V. Leone has posted something dealing with this subject, and this is what he says. Medicinal marijuana was pushed by Tina Munga Barnes. Listen carefully. I didn't say Tina Munya Barnes. I said Tina Munga Barnes. Pushed by Tina Munga Barnes, pushed the election campaign stunt again. Point is, Tina has gaslighted the Guam public, knowing Guam had no labs, certified personnel, and accountants, etc. Go figure it out. Yeah, Tina was medicinal marijuana. But it worked, you know, like Harry Reid said when he was pinned down. You said that that Mitt Romney hadn't paid taxes for 10 years, and that wasn't true, was it? Speaker Reid, I guess not. And you knew it, didn't you? Well, it worked, didn't it? That's all that counts. Yeah. Okay, I have an article that ran in the Post yesterday and another one from the Daily News that I think really kind of gets into some important facts about cannabis and marijuana. Starting out with the Post. This article is Time Frame to Act on Cannabis Rules Regulation Starts. Senators will have 90 days from March 1 to act on proposed rules and regulations for a local adult use cannabis industry. The time frame to adopt as is, reject, or modify the proposal began when the rules, which were recently adopted as they were approved by the Attorney General, were sent to the lawmakers. Well, I got to correct you again. Now, this may not be the newspaper's fault. It may be the members of the legislature. When rules are sent to the legislature can do a couple of things. The legislature can do nothing. And if the legislature does nothing, then the rules are approved upon the expiration of 90 days. 90 days later, those rules are adopted. Or the legislature can introduce a bill to approve the rules. And if the legislature does that, then the midnight of the day the governor signs, the rules are approved. Or the legislature can introduce a bill to reject the rules. Same set. The legislature cannot modify the rules. They can't say these are good rules, except I want to make 14 changes on page 3. Because the rulemaking function is delegated to the executive branch, not the legislative branch. So if the legislature wants to do something like that, it has to pass a law. And, of course, pass a bill. And once the bill is passed, we're not talking rules anymore. You're talking statute. So Another case where the legislature just dives into things and gets all wrapped around its own axle, and nobody really knows what they're doing. So those are your options. Now, if you don't like something in the rules, you can pass a law that says we are disapproving because of ABC. Try again, fix it, send it back, and we'll act on it. You can do that, but you can't just say, well, they worked on the rules. We don't like it, some parts of it, so we're changing it. Can't do that. Okay, if the senators do not approve, reject, or amend the rules by the 90-day deadline, the proposal will go into effect without changes. It'll go into effect without changes anyhow, or it won't go into effect at all. While the rules are about 120 pages, more than 1,000 pages worth of supporting documents like board minutes, public hearing transcripts, and fiscal impact estimates are included in the packet sent to lawmakers. That's unfortunate. I think probably anything more than about a page and a half isn't going to work. Especially for Senator Shelton, who can't even decide on a simple vote to override a veto of a one-page bill until the matter is actually called in a roll call vote. A preliminary cost assessment for the government of Guam, including these attachments, shows the new industry creates the need to hire 19 new employees. So it can't be all bad, 19 new employees. Think of all the paychecks, etc. The Department of Agriculture, Department of Public Health and Social Services, and the Department of Revenue Tax and the whole thing will cost $882,955. Is this trip really necessary? Do we want to spend almost $900,000 so that people can go into this all cash business and the Daily News can write about what the federal government should do? These agencies, as you were going on with this article, potential positive economic impacts are included as well through a study prepared for GovGuam by Tourism Economics, which I assume is a private company. The study estimates the island could see $11.5 million in marijuana sales from both tourists and residents in the first year dispensaries operate. Local residents accounted for 88% of the sales in the study. So, you know, that does not help the economy. Oh, yeah, look at how the economy will grow. The economy doesn't grow anymore at all, any more than you and I would have more money, Jose, if I agreed to wash your car for $10 a week and you agreed to mow my lawn for $10 a week, and then we decided we weren't making enough money and we raised it to $20. We're not making any more money. It's the same principle. If the money comes from folks who are already here, it's money they're spending on that and something else. It's not new money in the economy. The rules have been referred to the Legislature's Committee on Economic Development, Agriculture, Power, and Energy and the Arts, chaired by Senator Clint Rigel. The committee has oversight of the Cannabis Control Board, which is seeking to adopt the rules. Rigel told the Daily Post on Friday he and his office are still reviewing the submitted rules, regulations, and supporting documents. Well, that's really good news. All right, so then the Daily News did an even better article. Cannabis has been legal for adult recreation use since 2019, but the plant is still classified as Schedule I controlled substance federally. Many banks are hesitant to accept money from marijuana-related businesses because of potential penalties from federal regulators, such as the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. The Cannabis Control Board and Banking and Insurance Board both discussed the problem last week. According to Cannabis Control Board member Adrian Cruz, the money issue is unresolved. Growers, manufacturers, and sellers won't be able to bank their revenue, much of which will end up coming in as cash because of federal regulations. Cruz said numerous people were interested in applying for licenses to sell or grow cannabis, but they wouldn't invest if there was no way to store their money. Investors are kind of funny that way, aren't they?
No mattresses.
Yeah, they got mattresses, but just none of those great big king-size mattresses, just a little twin-bed mattress, you know, or a single-bed mattress. Cash-only businesses also would invite money laundering and theft. And, of course, that's what some people are banking on, the money laundering part of it. The banking problem is an issue with tax collections, too, Cruz told board members, as the Department of Rev Tax wouldn't be able to store any tax money collected without a bank to accept the money from cannabis businesses. According to Rev Tax Director Daphne Shimizu, also present at both meetings, the Insurance and Banking Commission of Hawaii used a third-party vendor, a bank in Colorado, to handle the processing of payments for Hawaii medicinal marijuana cannabis industry. Hawaii's medicinal cannabis industry.
Kind of a key word.
RevTax was in contact with Hawaiian officials. You talk to those two abortionists, I'll bet they know how to handle this. Cruz said the Colorado bank used an electronic system similar to PayPal to process payments. I can't speak for the other banks, but I know that we do have a department that is researching this matter, said Danilo Rapatis, Chief Risk Officer for Bank of Guam. Chief Risk Officer. I bet he had his hands full during the beginning of the pandemic when the consigliere was doing all of the contracts. We've developed policies based on what we're doing in San Francisco that may or may not address everybody's concern. Rapata said the businesses that were related to cannabis industry, like fertilizer suppliers, I wonder if that would count manure. I suspect Adrian Cruz would know about that. Were easily banked, but businesses that actually handle the cannabis were probably still unbankable. John McKinnon, Regulatory Risk Officer for Bank Pacific, said regulators for his company were advising that accepting cash from cannabis businesses would be very risky. Cruz advised the board to make the banking issue a priority. Now, the question pops into my mind, I wonder if Tina Munga Barnes knew about all these complications when she so providently pushed forward medicinal marijuana. What did Tina know, and when did she know it? It would be such an incredible waste of our time that we spent putting together rules and regs, and at the end of the day, when day one happens, we can't take their money. That's what Cruz said. Such a waste of time. The legislature is expected to approve the rules for the licensing of the cannabis business within 90 days. I can't wait. So here we are. We know we're out of step on the banking part. The Daily News has got to weigh in. What will marijuana add to our community? Now, I've gone through this before, and this is my thought on the subject. If there really is a medicinal use for marijuana, then we should take it off Schedule I and find out. Because if there's a medicinal use, we know how to deal with medicine. We have the Food and Drug Administration that does a pretty good job on dealing with medicine. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. Is it habit forming? Well, I already spoke about that. It's so habit forming that people are trying to make laws to justify their habituation to it, to kind of make themselves feel better about the whole thing, I suspect. And if it does, if it doesn't, that's the end of it. Now, if we go from medicinal marijuana to recreational marijuana, this is my thought here. We have enough problems with mind-altering drugs already. We've got crystal methamphetamine, we've got heroin, we've got cocaine. How does the society benefit by adding another mind-altering drug to the mix, especially with the imprimatur of the government on it? Not such a hot idea as far as I'm concerned. Okay, that's Demi Ekotny. Let's go to the card. I didn't have any time to sit down and put together some limericks today, but maybe tomorrow. So we start out, of course, with Paul Zerzan versus systemic racism. You guys all know how that one goes. The color of that rice in the picture is obviously red. Don't let anybody tell you it's orange. If you find anybody who tells you that it's orange, that person needs to be canceled.
Wrong.
Yeah, it's wrong. Yeah, and then next we've got a story. Well, let me just go through the calendar here. We've got, we already did marijuana versus money. And next we've got Ho S. Yoon versus South Korea. The Post versus the Daily News. And Rory versus GPD. Oh, and okay. Now, there was a picture in the paper of some people demonstrating for peaceful solution to the Korean conflict. It's a Norman Tarouk story. Residents call for peaceful solution to Korean conflict. And I titled that on the card, Ho S. Yoon versus South Korea. Now, I don't know what he had to do with that rally, whether he encouraged it, abetted it, sponsored it, financed it, or whatever. But I do refer you to his letter to his own newspaper. It's titled, "And the Korean War." And he's said, that there's been a ceasefire for the last 72 years, but he wants to see a unified, peaceful Korea, no more war. So he says, let's put an end to the Korean War. A noble sentiment in the abstract. But in the real world of realpolitik, such a sentiment, statement, or offering can only be seen as pro-North Korea, favoring the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, because the Democratic People's Republic of Korea don't want that. And they see anything like that, a softening on the part of the United States, the people of the United States, the South Koreans, they see that as an advantage. They see that as the people in the South finally getting wise and realizing that the boundary of the Democratic People's of Republic of Korea should go all the way to Jeju Island instead of stopping in the middle of the peninsula. So I see that rally and Ho's letter as, cast in terms of can't we all just get along, but is really favoring the North Korean side, the North Korean argument. And I went through this yesterday and explained to you that the North Korean regime has only one policy objective, and that is to keep the Kim family in power in perpetuity. And the way they are able to do that is through a cult of personality and myths. That Kim Il-sung was almost divine, born on top of the sacred mountain in North Korea, that he defeated the Japanese occupiers single-handedly, and it's only Kim and his son and Kim Jong-un and their leadership that keep the United States and the running dogs of American imperialism called the South Koreans from overrunning North Korea and making North Korea disappear. So he has to keep the country on a war footing in order to maintain the Kim dynasty. So for him to say, for them to agree, yeah, we should have one peaceful North Korea, that's the end of the Kims. And that's just not going to happen. That is realism, the way things are. And I say that, of course, being an expert, actually on so many things, right? It's only a 2-hour show, so I can't go through the whole list, I guess. But
should have started from the top of the hour.
Yeah, I should have, right?
No time.
No time left. But I am an expert on the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea because I spent a week there a few years ago. Something that is very, very few people can talk about. I've been in South Korea many times. I've been to the DMZ on both sides. I've been in that little blue house with a table in the middle of it. And that's my analysis, that anything that favors a peace in the Korean Peninsula without the dethroning of the Kim dynasty is not going to work, and it's pro-Kim, anti-Korean. Okay, let's move on to the next item on the card here. Next item on the card, I've labeled Post versus PDN. And they both dealt with the same news item. See if you could detect the difference here between the Post and the Daily News. Here's what the Daily News says. Hansen helicopter trial to start today for fraud charges. And it says, Hansen Helicopter Inc. owner John Walker. Oh, he's into helicopters too?
And scotch.
Yeah. Well, I suppose he can get his helicopters in black or red if you got a lot of money in blue, right? In fact, the picture in the newspaper is of a blue helicopter. Must be Johnny Walker Blue, right? Hansen Helicopter Inc. owner, Director of Maintenance Philip Kapp, and what a set of names here. Director of Maintenance Philip Kapp. He's just going to put a cap on all of this stuff. And Director of Operations Kenneth Crow, who's in charge of the mess hall, are accused of acquiring scrap, destroyed, or otherwise not airworthy aircraft, then falsifying records and defrauding federal authorities for profit, according to charging documents. The three men in the helicopter company as a whole are scheduled to begin trial this morning at the district court before Chief Judge Frances Tydenko Gatewood. Do you know why Frances Tydenko Gatewood is the chief judge, Jose?
The only chief judge.
She's the only judge, yeah. Walker, Kapp, and Crow. Sounds like a rock group. And next we've got a new song from Walker, Kapp, and Crow. Each face close to 100 charges that include conspiracy, fraud, bribery, money laundering in connection with their work at Hansen, documents state. Some of the charges are connected to the three men conspiring to defraud agencies of the United States after a Hansen aircraft crashed and pilot Rafael Antonio Cruz Santos was killed on September 2, 2015, documents state. Following the crash, Kapp documented he performed the necessary inspections and maintenance for the helicopter that crashed when he did not. Crow submitted the false logbooks to the Federal Aviation Administrator's investigation in the crash, documents state. Kapp also wrote a letter to Buddy Orsini. No, not really. Okay, there's a story. Now, just reading the story, what is the source of everything in this story? Documents, right? So I guess that's the whole story. Okay, then I turn to the Post. Same helicopter, same Walker, Kapp, and Crow. Here's what the Post says. As the trial is slated to begin in the Hansen helicopter's criminal case this week, the defense is calling for the removal of the prosecution team and an evidentiary hearing on allegations the government's conduct has reached another level of outrageousness. Now, which story are you going to spend more time on?
The latter.
Yeah. Attorney David Lujan, on behalf of his client, Kenneth Rufus Crow, filed a motion on Sunday evening alleging government prosecutors have not only acted negligently, but unethically. Crow was the director of operations for Hansen Helicopters. Lujan accused prosecutors of trying to entrap him and alleges he was in an unsolicited video showing the U.S. Attorney's Office coercing a witness to provide false testimony. Now, the word entrap is kicked around a lot, And once again, I think we'll turn on our Law and Order notebooks. And I will tell you what the word entrap means in the criminal law. Entrap means more than, well, we caught him in the act. What it means, in order to make a defense of entrapment fly, defendant has to show that he did not have an inclination to commit the alleged crime, that law enforcement approached him, planted the idea of committing the crime in his head, and in some even minor way kind of led him toward that direction. So, but if the guy already wanted to rob the bank and the federal agent approaches and said, you know, the first bank, the West Bank of the Mississippi gets a big cash shipment every Friday, that ain't entrapment. Okay, so David Lohan says they're trying to entrap him. Now, pronoun use is a little bit slippery use here, so I couldn't tell at this point whether the entrapment was aimed at Crow or at Attorney David Lohan, because he used the word him. I guess both of them, those are their that's their pronouns, him, he, and his, right?
Excuse me, it's ma'am. It is ma'am.
It's him.
Him, all right.
I don't know where that guy came from. Or, ma'am, I don't know where she came from.
Yeah. The federal government alleges the defendants covered up safety violations by forging documents, counterfeiting aircraft parts, and bribing a federal aviation safety inspector, court documents state. Timothy J. Sislow was the safety inspector who pled guilty in this case. Is that kind of important? Yeah. So there's a crooked FAA safety inspector who's already pled guilty. Did you find that in the Daily News story?
Nope.
All right, let's take a short break and we'll come back to Hanson Helicopters.
Always here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're banking on the future. No services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Okay, so we got about 5 minutes until the big halftime show, but I was peeking at Facebook and I noticed a post by Bill Fritton. He said, perhaps Judge Bob is the Ron Burgundy of Guam. Well, let me just tell you about a conversation I had last Saturday with a longtime acquaintance. And he said, how you doing, Bob? And I said, hey, I'm doing pretty good. I had a good show yesterday. Let me tell you about it. So I spent about the next 20 minutes explaining Friday's show to him, and he very patiently sat there and listened and nodded and acted like he was paying attention. After I finished explaining Friday's show to him, I thought I ought to be a little bit more open. So I said to him, well, that's enough about me. Let's talk about you. What did you think of yesterday's show?
He's correct.
He got it, yeah. Bill Fritton's got it. Okay, let's get back into Johnny Walker here. Let's see. Yeah, so this guy, this Federal Aviation Administrative Safety Inspector, pled guilty. Did you find that out from reading the Daily News article? No.
Nope.
In this new issue, the defense particularly took issue with a document filing prosecutors provided to the court on February 25 intended to be private for the court's review without serving the defense, according to the defense. Now that's pretty baroque. Because as a general principle, what you serve on the court, you serve the opposite party. If you don't, it's called an ex parte communication. And as a general principle, you get into trouble with ex parte communications. The filing violated the government's duty of candor to the court and contains nothing but false smears against Lujan and his client. The defense motion states, this sounds more like Twitter than a court proceeding. Lujan indicated that he only learned of the filing when it was inadvertently served to the defendants. In other words, they screwed up and gave it to the other side. Lujan alleges the government concocted a story that defense attorney knew that certain witness would testify live because of an accusation that he engaged in witness tampering. The defense alleges emails it obtained show that this particular witness and Special Assistant U.S. Attorney Marie Miller were secretly working together to entrap Lujan. That's some really, really heavy-duty stuff.
That's a huge accusation.
Yeah, it is. And you know, if that's what actually happened, this could be a career-ending event for attorney Marie Miller. I didn't notice that in the Daily News story, though. Did you, Jose?
I did not see that.
No. Lujan has asked the court to order the submission of those emails in a format that doesn't have blacked-out sections. Maybe they'll bring Rory in as a consultant. He'll tell them what they have to disclose and what they don't have to. All you got to do is say, it's a personnel matter. The defense motion stated Lujan filed a digital recording of an unsolicited video of the witness declaring that the U.S. Attorney's Office had coerced him into giving false testimony and alleged the video demonstrates either that the government has engaged in witness tampering or that the video was part of a scheme by Miller and the witness to entrap Lujan. Wow. This sounds like, you know what the reporter's name here is? John Le Carré. All right, let's break for the big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Another ceasefire attempt. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Russian forces in Ukraine supposed to quiet their guns at this hour to allow citizens a chance to flee from hard-hit cities in eastern Ukraine.
We still have that 200,000 estimated civilians trapped down in the southern city of Mariupol. 3 ceasefires that would have affected those civilians, given them a chance to get out, have now collapsed in 3 consecutive days. They have very little food down there, very little water, and no power.
Fox's Jonathan Hunt in Lviv. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky remains defiant, even revealing his location in a speech Monday.
I stay here in Kyiv at Bankova Street. I don't hide, and I'm not afraid of anyone. I will stay here as long as it's necessary to win in our patriotic war.
Zelensky again asking for outside help, warning NATO nations could be next if in Vladimir Putin's next conquest, that is, if he's not stopped. The White House still mulling calls to ban the import of Russian oil and considering foreign alternatives.
The White House confirms they're asking a trio of countries with spotty human rights records what it would take for them to produce more oil: Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, and Iran. Officials insist no decision yet. Democrats are increasingly calling on President Biden to ban imports from Russia. One Democrat is hoping Biden does more to produce energy here. But a carbon-free future remains the priority. So allowing Keystone XL pipeline construction to resume remains off the table.
Fox's Peter Ducey at the White House. Crude oil is trading above $122 a barrel. The Supreme Court has allowed congressional district boundaries redrawn by state courts in Pennsylvania and North Carolina to stand rather than the maps drawn by legislatures in each state. The court-ordered maps considered more favorable to Democrat candidates. America is listening to Fox News.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Hindi ang inyong bangko na tapat sa serbisyo. Tunay na kaibigan at handa para sa inyo. Ang bangko ng kinabukasan, laging maaasahan. Bank Pacific, where others plug branches, we place through.
The first criminal trial arising from the incursion at the U.S. Capitol last year is about to head to a jury in federal court.
Federal attorneys rested their case against Guy Reffitt. He's being tried for breaching the Capitol with a weapon and interfering with police. He is also accused of making threats against his children if they told police about his role in the Capitol attack. Reffitt's defense did not call any witnesses. Testimony indicated Reffitt was armed when he attended the Stop the Steal rally earlier that day. Witnesses said he was also wearing body armor and carrying zip-tie restraints when he engaged cops on the Hill. The jury will hear closing arguments before being instructed and getting the case. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Jury selection begins Tuesday in the trial of 4 men accused of conspiring to kidnap Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer. The government says the men were upset about Whitmer's COVID-19 restrictions in the early days of the pandemic, but defense lawyers say their clients were entrapped after being groomed and cajoled by federal agents and informants. Ohio cracking down on fraternity pledge hazing after the death of a student at a state university 1 year ago.
The death of 20-year-old Stone Foltz spurred a wide number of changes at Bowling Green State University and beyond, including a new state law with tougher criminal penalties for hazing. Foltz was joining the Pi Kappa Alpha fraternity last March. He was found unconscious by a roommate after pledges finished or attempted to finish a bottle of alcohol. Foltz died 3 days later. 7 fraternity members and another man have been charged. 2 have pleaded guilty. The university has since installed a zero-tolerance hazing policy with penalties including expulsion when there's death or serious physical harm. Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
School teachers in Minneapolis will strike in the morning, claiming the school district there hasn't budged on their demands for higher pay, smaller classes. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Subway keeps the Eat Fresh Refresh subs rolling in with a fresh take on timeless classics. Try the honey mustard rotisserie style chicken. It's the new Subway rotisserie style chicken with a flavor upgrade, mizzled with honey mustard on hearty multigrain bread and topped with fresh hand-sliced veggies. Craving some heat? The Baja Turkey Avocado hits all the hot notes. Oven roasted turkey stacked high on hearty multigrain speared with smashed avocado and drizzled with the pecan chipotle sauce. Tuck into new subs to savor at Subway. Eat fresh.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Half a day. This is Jade Uggan from Security Title, and in celebration of Chamorro Month, here is a tip on dealing with your land. You might be thinking of giving part of your property to your child or another family member. Once you have subdivided the property and recorded the map, you will also need to record the deed transferring the title. Just drawing the map is not enough to make sure they actually own the land. Protehi y Tanonmu. When it comes to your family land, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
So there we go. It's another great halftime show on Tall Tales, and we are going to come back to, let me see, hang on here just a second. Get my Facebook up and running. Yeah, we're going to go back here to the Post versus the PDN. And just the end of the Post article where David Lujan, the defense motion states Lujan filed a digital recording of an unsolicited video of the witness declaring that the U.S. Attorney's Office had coerced him into giving false testimony and alleged the video demonstrates either the government was engaged in witness tampering or that the video was part of a scheme by Miller, an assistant United States attorney, and the witness to entrap Lujan. Lujan has asked the court to set a hearing to address the concerns raised by the defense and schedule an evidentiary hearing, issue an order directing the government to be represented by a new assistant U.S. attorney at the evidentiary hearing who has no prior connection to the case. Lujan also is asking the court to admonish the government that all government communications between certain witnesses be turned over to the defense. Lujan further seeks court order requiring the government to unredact all emails attached to the government's filing with the court, issue an order requiring the government to provide the defendant all audio transmissions, and provide all audio recordings in which any potential witness or defendant is speaking. Prosecution has not filed a response to Lujan's new allegations as of Monday's deadline. So this is... You know, if you read the Daily News, you'd say, well, this is kind of serious. These guys, you know, were violating some laws because they cannibalized junk helicopters and used the parts. If you read the Post story, you'd start out with that as you know, kind of like the first, the 15th sentence. And there's all kinds of really dramatic stuff going on. So why did the Daily News not cover the whole story like the Post did? Are they on somebody's side? Are they tilting? Are they giving vent to their biases? Or are they inept, lazy, shorthanded, understaffed, all of the above, etc.? But if I were the Daily News, I would read the Post every day and vice versa. And if I got drubbed this bad, I would feel pretty bad, Mr. Daily News, Mr. Kaleo Moylan. So that's where we are, and that's why I put this on the card as the Post versus the Daily News, not David Lujan versus the U.S. or whatever. Because if we don't get accurate reports from the four media outlets here on what's going on with our government, I would not be spending my time very wisely talking about what's going on because I wouldn't know. I don't have the time or the ability to go and follow up all of these important stories. That's why we pay newspapers and TV stations to do it. So that's why I put it on the card that way. Now, I've got Frenchie who wants to talk about cannabis, he wants to talk about the Lujan acquisition, and he wants to talk about the media and the framing of Ukraine. So let's just start out with Lujan here so we can stay on the same subject, and we'll see where that goes. Okay, Frenchie?
Yeah, you want to start with David Lujan, huh?
Yes,
okay.
sir. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, knowing David Lujan, I mean, we know he's a good defense lawyer, especially in crime cases.
Let me add something to that. I remember at one time when David was relatively young, he had 17 criminal jury trials, and he won 16 not guilties. 16 not guilties. Most defense counsel, if they did that an entire career, would feel pretty good about it. He did it. He did it 16 out of 17.
Yeah, that's a pretty good batting average, I would say.
Yes, sir.
Now some of his critics might say he's not the highest beacon of integrity, but that's an opinion, and everybody has an opinion like they have something else. So, unfortunately, I would say that after 5 years of the DOJ, the FBI, and all those people going after Donald Trump using basically criminal ways in order to achieve their goals. And also, when you see the investigation on January 6th and the lack of credibility of those investigations, one can be tempted to doubt the government side of the story. And that is very sad because it was a time when the FBI and the DOJ had a stellar reputation. And, basically what they said, when they said something, it was hard to go against what they were saying. But their record is not good, and that we would have a U.S. attorney who could entrap the defense lawyer is nowadays something of the realm of possibilities, and it's very sad, but that's the way it is. It's a reality, which is very unfortunate, but it's a reality. So notwithstanding the case and all the details and everything, it is very troubling, to say the least. And the reporting, of course, is not up to par. But this is not just our media. It's true about everything, and we've seen it in that story with marijuana or cannabis, whatever you want to call it. What I found out, and then I was, like you, a very big critic of this legalization of marijuana outside of medical marijuana, but now it's legal, and people don't really see the consequences of it. I'm always questioning why politicians would want a large part of the population to be high. What are they fearing about that about the citizens of this country? Then they need them to be high, not to pay attention to what the politicians are doing, what's going on. So the other thing is that we have example of states, that, especially California and Colorado, that have gone that route before we did. And we have not even started our process because they have not agreed to the rules. But what we found out in both California and in Colorado is that once the process is established, the legal, quote unquote, or like the former senator would say,
you're talking about Kelly
March, I don't know.
Yeah.
So what we found out is that the legal pot distributors actually end up being muscled in by illegal dealers, because illegal dealers use those small business to do money laundering of their illegal acquire business. And this is a major issue in California nowadays, and it's a major issue in Colorado, and both the states and the federal law enforcement agencies do not have enough manpower to follow the money in those cases. So this should raise a lot of questions. To me, it raises even more question when the Bank of Guam, what do they call it? Risk assessment representative,
officer, yes,
who is also the lawyer representing the Bank of Guam in the case against the Archdiocese, is talking about legalize money on illegal products. Federal side.
Frenchie, one of the sources of my undying wisdom is my old Aunt Florence, who could sum up all kinds of important things with one sentence. And Aunt Florence would say, never expect to find an honest partner in a dishonest deal.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very scary. So that leads me then with the media tilting the table, and that the piece that you mentioned earlier about the peaceful solution in Ukraine, the demonstration where that gentleman from Cortec was also a participant. It's interesting because we know all the propaganda that is going on right now, Putin bad, the West good, and all the simplification and mental meltdown that people are having over the Ukraine, and telling Russia they are doing something illegal, completely forgetting what we've done in Serbia, in Kosovo, in Libya, in Iraq, and in Syria, which is basically what Putin is doing now. So when we're doing it, it's okay, but when the Russians do it, it's not. And what we have, which is very worrisome, is the EU and the U.S. Sanction against Russia, because it could actually come back and bite us in the rear. There is the exclusion of certain Russian banks from the SWIFT system, which is basically the exchange that allows international money exchange. The freeze of assets of the Russian central bank, which is close to 600 billion euros just for Europe. And I'm not talking about dollars, because they had defunded most of their dollar economy. They are basically represent a little more than 1.5%. But what it is that it will have a huge impact on the derivative products. And you've talked about derivative products before on your shows. Most people don't really understand what it is, but it's basically if I'm selling apples and you're afraid the apple price is going to go up, you make a contract with me that in the future for next year, we're going to agree on a price of on apples. And even if the price is double, I have a contract that we're going to buy apples from you at that price. This is what the airline industry does when they do derivative products on oil. They agree on a price in advance on that oil in order to mitigate the risk of them having to pay oil 3 or 4 times the price, like it happened in 2008 when we had the Lehman Brothers and AIG collapse. Oil went up like crazy, and suddenly it was 120. Now it's $130 a barrel. Basically, it's a form of insurance for long-term investment, and it's exercising your buy and sell options. And by doing those measures against the Central Bank of Russia and private banks in Russia, what we're doing is that we're taking a huge risk that some bank along the way that will hold a lot of Russian debt will actually have to collapse, because the Russians can say, oh, well, it's a case of major force and we are not going to pay you. And then what happens is that it will have a domino effect on the whole Western economy. Can you hear me?
I do.
Yeah. So this is a huge issue. It also does a thing is that it's forcing China to push for other countries in Asia to stop dealing in U.S. dollars and doing the yuan as a major currency. So it's advancing the Chinese plan, which has been in place for 10 years, to supplant the U.S. dollar as the international money currency, and they are well on their way of being successful. And it is very worrisome, because when Biden was elected, we were told, well, now the adults in the rooms are here and we're going to take care of things. But those people are acting like spoiled teenagers, and they are terrible. I mean, the risk they're putting us in, is amazing. Now we have the White House calling on Venezuela and Iran, who are openly supporters of Russia and enemies of the United States, to increase their oil production, which I think you're going to talk about later on. And because this stupid president, first thing was to close Canadian Petroleum coming through the pipeline, which was already finished, ready to go. And so now the Canadians are sending it to the Asians by doing another pipeline to their west coast. Those people have absolutely no idea of what they are trying to do.
But Frenchie, what about the environment?
And this is it. Actually, you have members of this government right now that are arguing two things. They are arguing that inflation is the fault of Russia invading Ukraine, even though the inflation was running rampant before. Now it's going to be worse. And now they're also arguing that if we had built more solar and more wind energy, we wouldn't be in the situations we're in right now. So they are blaming the fact that we don't have enough renewable, quote unquote, energy in our mix of production, and this is absolutely hypocritical.
Back to Aunt Florence.
Go ahead.
Frenchie. Aunt Florence would say, never underestimate the stupidity of an environmental wacko.
Yeah, and she was right.
Mm-hmm.
Your Aunt Florence was a wise woman, and so basically nowadays, what I see is that, I know you're not a big fan of him, but Teddy Roosevelt used to say, talk softly but carry a big stick. And now we have people in our State Department that are hysterical. They make a lot of noise, and they carry a toothpick. It is just mind-boggling, and it's just, we have stop our own productions of oil, and now we are hostage to those people. And what is happening now is that the people from what was his name, Fukushima, the political analyst after the fall of the the Berlin Wall.
Francis Fujikawa or
Fujikawa.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fujikawa. His theories are proving to be wrong, and Huntington, who was his opposite philosophy, is actually proving to be right, except that instead of being the Christian world against the Muslim world, we have a Protestant world of modernism versus an Orthodox world of millennia tradition, which is going in different direction. And the Catholics are us. We are stuck in the middle and not doing very much. So it's very interesting that on the we are pushing a lot of those ideas on the moral high ground, but we actually do not have that moral high ground. It's very interesting. At the same time, we are making a huge scandal about 100,000 Russian troops invading Ukraine, but we are totally silent about 2.5 million people invading the USA through the southern border. And I would remind people the history of the Roman Empire. It is not the warriors that downfall the Roman Empire. It was mass illegal immigration into the empire that supplanted the Romans. And this is what we're seeing. And our political leaders think it's going to help them in the midterm election. I don't know. I hope the American voters are a lot smarter than that. So.
Well, Frenchie, as usual, you gave us a lot of food for thought. Your presentation was so dynamic that you have prompted one of our Tall Tales heroes, the man who enlightened us about systemic racism is holding right now. So we'll go for a Wrigley Field for the 7th inning stretch and come back to Paul Zerzan. Okay. Thank you, Frenchie.
And I had a suggestion for the pot people. You know, maybe they should start a smoke red rice industry.
Okay, Frenchie. Thank you, Frenchie.
All right, you guys take care. I will listen carefully.
So long.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point. Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Attention tailgaters. It's time for you to get a new tail to gate on. It's a fact. They got a 2021 model clearance going on all kinds of your favorite Nissan models, the Rogue Sport, Kicks, Murano, Titan, and they've all got great FM radios so that you can pick up tall tales in the afternoon. 0% APR, or your first 3 payments are on Nissan. Zero down magic tailgaters. Learn more by visiting NissanGuam.com.
Well, here we are, in Wrigley Field for the 7th inning stretch. We had Paul Zerzan right up until now. Maybe Paul had to make a head call here in Wrigley Field. So, Paul, call back in, and whatever I'm talking about, I'll stop and let you go on. I really want to hear your response to Frenchie's rap about the Ukraine. So, 671-888-8255. And while we're waiting for Paul to reconnect, I'll go to the next item on the card. This is called Rory versus GPD. And the reason that it's titled that way is a little subtle, like so much of Tall Tales. That's why we have a producer back there that beeps a horn whenever I'm being facetious, exaggerating, etc., which is most of the time, right, Jose?
I got a sore finger, Bob.
Okay. All right, so this is titled GPD Dispatcher Arrested Last Year, Appeals Suspension. Article in the Post. One of 3 police department employees arrested last year on suspicion of impaired driving is appealing a 13-day suspension handed down in late September. GPD confirmed in July 2021 that 3 of its employees had been arrested, 2 civilians and 1 police officer, and that an administrative investigation had been launched. The 3 employees were arrested on suspicion of driving while impaired, according to a GPD press release at the time. The 3 were identified as Rochelle Marie Bachman, part of the Bachman-Turner overdrive. No, right? No doubt, right?
No, wrong Bachman.
No. Ria Renee Sanchez, Karina Irene Titano Paulino. All 3 were booked. Let's see, Bachman is 26, Sanchez is 30, Paulino is 28. All 3 were booked and released, issued notices to appear in court at a later date, according to the Attorney General. In that time, the Attorney General had the opportunity to review charges and determine whether there was enough cause to file a case in court. The Attorney General lodged a misdemeanor complaint with the court against Paulino, but it's still being confirmed for the Post whether a judge reviewed the case for probable cause and signed off on it. On Wednesday, GPD spokesperson Officer Berlin Savella, that's an interesting name, confirmed the administrative investigation had been completed. Investigation's completed. We know the names of the people, but she said she cannot comment on any actions brought against the employees, calling it confidential and of a personnel nature. No! You see how Rory got involved here? No. I don't know how you get to be the GPD spokesperson when you don't have a better understanding of your job than coming along with a rap like this. I can't talk about it. It's confidential and of a personnel nature. That doesn't work. And I may have to fire off a sunshine myself on this one. We can't tolerate this. This idea that police officers commit misconduct and we are not able to find out what the misconduct was or what happened. It's just not, and it's, it's sort of an encouragement for cops to commit misconduct because, you could drive in the front of Jerry's restaurant and until there's a gigantic uproar in the community, nothing's going to happen. Sanchez was suspended as indicated by the final adverse action included in her appeal at the Civil Service Commission. Now, the way they do it is that, here's a Law and Order notebooks again. When a government employee may have committed misfeasance, nonfeasance, or malfeasance, the director of that agency has to give that employee a notice in writing as to what the employee did wrong. It's called a notice of proposed adverse action. The director's got 90 days from the day that he knew about the misconduct or should have known about the misconduct to get that adverse action in the employee's hands and wrapped up. When the employee gets that notice, the employee can set up a meeting with the chief within the next 10 days and come in and tell the chief his, her, or their sides of the story. They could do it orally in writing. They can bring witnesses. They can bring affidavits. They can bring counsel if they want to. After considering that, the chief then issues his final notice of adverse action, which says, you didn't do anything wrong. You did something so wrong that I'm canning you effective tomorrow. You did something wrong and I'm suspending you for 13 days. You did something wrong and I'm demoting you from police officer 3 to police officer 2. All of those things are options. Once that paper is in the hand of the employee, within the next 30 days, he can file an appeal with the Civil Service Commission. The matter then goes before the Civil Service Commission, which will take testimony, compile evidence, and issue a decision. In the last couple of years, perhaps through the auspices of a administrative law judge who does all of that and presents the commission with an opinion that they may reject or adopt. The final notice of adverse action that will be filed with that appeal will be what the media goes to, because the police department's not able to shield that from the public view, although I'm sure they'd like to. It's one thing that the directors don't want to talk about is misconduct in their own agency, and that's why I brought Rory into this. Down at the port, during the gambling scam, when it was found out that one government employee was running a gambling hookup among several law enforcement agencies in the government, including a couple of them at the port. And this was a news story. The guy that ran the ring got fired. Others, we really don't know what happened, because Rory's response was typical. Well, we did an investigation when this came to our attention, but it's a personnel matter and I'm prohibited from discussing it. Well, no, you're not prohibited. I had a long pen pal relationship with Rory. He stuck to his guns. It's a good report in the Post as to actually how it turned out, because there is no prohibition about discussing personnel matters in the government rules or statutes. There is a provision that says under certain circumstances, certain kinds of matters in a personnel file don't have to be released. Big difference between don't have to and can't. So it's a director's discretion. And in Rory's case, he didn't want to talk about misconduct in his agency. I can't talk about it. I'm prohibited. It's a personnel matter. About a year later, when Joanne Brown's name came up, he couldn't stop talking about Joanne Brown. So the rule at the port is, it's a personnel matter. I can't talk about it if it's misconduct in my agency, unless the person that you're asking about is somebody I don't like. And then...
So then it becomes a personal matter, and I can talk about that.
Yeah, I can talk about it all day long. So it looks like the police department has done this before. They've fallen into what I'm going to refer to as the Rory trap. Instead of discussing misconduct in their agency, which is something the public is vitally interested in, instead of doing that, they'll come up with BS line like this: it's confidential and of a personnel nature. Sanchez was suspended as indicated by the final adverse action. Any action against the other two remains unknown because they're confidential and of a personnel. Now, we have a right to know that. What happened to the other two? One of them got suspended. What about the other two? Sanchez, a police dispatcher, said the suspension was unfair, unjust, and procedurally defective. The assault action included an investigation of events. GPD did not state who the police officer was among the 3 arrested employees in its initial release about the incident last year. Just like it was, you almost had to hire a dentist to find out the name of the police officer down there at Jeep Throat, also known as Jerry Gate. Because you had to almost hire a dentist because it was like pulling teeth to find out that name.
Have they even mentioned the name? People have to find it in documents, right? They still won't say who that person's name is.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. The investigation identified two dispatchers, Sanchez and Paulino, and does name a police officer, but calls her Rochelle M. Benavente, not Rochelle Bachman. However, GPD confirmed Benavente and Bachman are the same person. Probably like Kaiser Soze and...
Who?
Kaiser Soze and Verbal Kint. Yeah, you know that guy that has to play Junkin Poe with himself every morning to find out which identity he's going to. I won't mention Carl's name here, but you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. According to the investigation, a police officer from Central Precinct responded to a reported assault on June 23, 2021. Officer Bachman reported that she was assaulted by Paulino while at a residence in Barragata. During the investigation, it was discovered that Paulino operated a vehicle after consuming several alcoholic beverages during the night before the alleged assault was reported. The case was closed after Bachman refused to file charges, the investigation stated, but a reinvestigation was later initiated by the chief of police. Now, here's another one. Let's debunk another myth. Bachman refused to file charges. That's not how it works. A person makes a complaint to the police police investigate. If the police think that there's a possibility that a crime was committed, they'll send it to the Attorney General. The Attorney General decides whether or not to prosecute. It's not necessary for anybody to make a complaint if the cops become aware of this. Now, where a complainant has a little leverage, a complainant could tell the police, I don't want you to, Bachman could say to the police, I don't want to go forward with this, and if you do, I'm not going to be a very good witness. So let's just forget about it. But Bachman can't say, I'm refusing to file charges. Once you call the cops, that's it. And once again, these things are so mangled sometimes by the press that it's hard to know exactly what went on. By June 30, the investigation was complete, and it was determined there was probable cause to arrest Bachman, Sanchez, and Paulino while driving while impaired. According to the investigation, Bachman confessed to consuming alcohol at a karaoke lounge on June 23. I wonder if she's a good singer. Yeah, they didn't mention that in the report here.
What was the last song?
Yeah.
That's important.
Save the Last Dance for Me, no doubt. Benny King and the Drifters. She also reportedly confessed to driving a vehicle to follow Paulino to Sanchez restaurant as were residents, and it was that residence that Paulino and Bachman engaged in a physical altercation. Paulino allegedly confessed to drinking at multiple establishments that night before driving to Sanchez's house. Paulino reportedly was Sanchez's designated driver. So the designated driver was drunk. If the designated driver is drunk, does the designator also have to play the rap?
Good question.
Yeah, I authorize Mr. X to drive, to be my designated driver. Then he gets drunk. Well, I'm the one that made him the driver. Seems right, doesn't it, Jose? Sanchez also reportedly drank at multiple establishments and was said to have departed her residence in a vehicle and driven to Hagatna, where she sustained a flat tire before spending the night at another residence. You know, what a suspense-ending climax.
Sanchez regrets she did not drive into the front of a restaurant. Wait, no, that's not in there.
No. Sanchez said she learned an important lesson about tire maintenance. Yeah, okay. But once again, the words of the new spokesman at the police department, I think, must be paid a certain amount of attention. Berlin Sevilla confirmed the administrative investigation had been completed, but said she could not comment on any actions brought against the employees, calling it confidential and of a personnel nature.
Now, why is it that we can get the police blotter and even the court and all sorts of adverse action against them whenever they get arrested or they get charged with something, but we can't with these employees?
Well, if an employee commits misconduct, isn't it kind of a bad reflection on the boss?
Mm-hmm. From the get-go.
Yeah. Rory didn't want to talk about those two gamblers at the port. He was prohibited by law.
Captain Renault, Rory Renault.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I've come to the end of the card, and we're going to head for Churchill Downs, and I'm going to dig something out of last week's card here.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Well, here we are, the home stretch. Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky. That means I got just 6 furlongs more till I get to the finish line. And I'm going to pick up on a story that I started yesterday, Mark Twain versus language acquisition. And you recall it started out because the Daily News ran a story on the front page, 5-year-old proves language can thrive. And they made a big deal about a 5-year-old who could speak Chamorro. Isn't that amazing, Jose? That a 5-year-old could speak Chamorro.
It's in the records.
Yeah. And this caused me to dredge up one of my old Mark Twain quotes. When Mark Twain returned from his Paris vacation, he said he was surprised to find that even the children spoke French. The point being that kids can learn anything that they're properly exposed to. Language learning is easy for kids. 5-year-olds can learn it a whole lot faster than 50-year-olds, I can tell you that. And this then led into this whole Mess Chamorro thing and a story by Laura Sauter talking about nationhood. And I finally found something that she said, because she's right in there. She's a separatist, and she'll do the identity politics right along with Robert Underwood, who has been teaching critical race theory since 1972. But Laura said, let's see here. I just had it at my fingertips here a second. Yeah. She said, nation building refers to the process whereby a people consciously and deliberately engage in shaping institutions and priorities that fulfill their aspirations. In this context, nationhood or exercising cultural sovereignty has less to do with geopolitical control than it has to do with control of the psyche and identity consciousness of a people. And I said, fine. So you Chamorro separatists are in the position you can remain part of the American political family and build your nation right here. There's nothing stopping you. And it's anomalous to think that you can't build your nation unless you use what you guys call the colonizer's own government. The colonizer established the government of Guam. The government of Guam is an act of Congress. So you know, finally, Laura Sauter, I think, stumbled on it. I don't think she quite realizes what she said, but she's right. So that takes me back into this whole dedication to identity politics now, which has been there, at least according to Robert, since 1972 in his mind. And it really started to blow up in the last 4 or 5 years, especially since the death of George Floyd. And I want to make the argument that Brown versus Board of Education, the school desegregation case, was actually a mistake because it tended to be the beginning of the dedication to identity politics, which we would be a whole lot better off without if all of us, including especially our government, were colorblind. And I read from Brown versus Board of Education, and I'll pick up part of it again. With children in grade and high school, such considerations apply with added force to children in grade and high schools to separate them from others of similar age and qualifications solely because of their race generates a feeling of inferiority as to their status in the community that may affect their hearts and minds in a way unlikely ever to be undone. The effect of this separation on their educational opportunity was well stated by a finding in the Kansas case by a court which nevertheless felt compelled to rule against the Negro plaintiffs. And then there's a quote from the Supreme Court of Kansas, kind of goes off on the same leg. And then we wind up with this. Whatever may have been the extent of psychological knowledge at the time of Plessy versus Ferguson, this finding is amply supported by modern authority. And then we come to footnote 11. Footnote 11 cites a work by K.B. Clark called Effective Prejudice and Discrimination on Personality Development. Another one by Whitner and Klitzkie, Personality in the Making. Deutscher and Sheen, The Psychological Effects of Enforced Segregation. Sheen, What are the Psychological Effects of Segregation under Conditions of Equal Facilities, etc. And finally, generally, Myrdal, An American Dilemma. Gunnar Myrdal was a Swedish author, philosopher, psychologist, sociologist, whatever. So basically, if you dig into this, the law that is cited in Brown versus Board is not the law at all. It's a book by a sociologist called Gunnar Myrdal. The book is called An American Dilemma. You go through it, you won't find any law in Warren's opinion. And one day when I got more time, I'll explain why. Because this is not a decision that's based on the law. It's based on feelings, strictly on feelings. Now, I wouldn't want anyone to think that I'm endorsing segregation based on the race, although that's where we wound up because of this decision, because now we must measure the feelings of the people involved. Not the law, not the established law, not principles of law. So because of Brown versus Board of Education, we followed up with a case called, what was it?
Plessy?
No, Plessy came first. The Charlotte Mecklenburg case. I can't remember the plaintiff's name, but that's where the Supreme Court says, yeah, you can bust kids all over the dark side of the moon, so that everybody goes to integrated schools, quote unquote.
When I was in grade school in Georgia, they had that called M2M, minority to majority busing. What was interesting is as soon as the kids came into the school, lunchtime, they resegregated themselves.
Certainly.
Even the kids that lived in the area that were minorities.
Yeah. Yeah, Swan versus Charlotte Mecklenburg was the name of the case. So that tore some towns apart. I don't know if Boston ever recovered. So you had situations where a kid lives across the street from a school. And in order to achieve the plan from Charlotte Mecklenburg, Swan versus Charlotte Mecklenburg, he has to be bused to a school that's 10 miles away where he doesn't know anybody, the kids aren't from his neighborhood, et cetera, et cetera. But it's necessary to desegregate the schools. And it has caused all kinds of problems. And if we're concerned about feelings, I'd like to see the psychological write-ups on the effect of enforced busing on kids, minority kids, how it made them feel to have this, to be the subject of this, how this all came down. So I say that if you study Brown versus Board of Education, it really said it's okay to do identity politics. And then we got into all kinds of affirmative action and all kinds of other things, primarily based on feelings. Now, I go back to Plessy versus Ferguson, the case that everybody likes to beat up on, and it was an 8-1 decision. The one was a justice named Harlan. And here's Harlan's, a portion of Harlan's dissent. He said, in respect of civil rights common to all citizens, the Constitution of the United States does not, I think, permit any public authority to know the race of those entitled to be protected in enjoyment of such rights. Government has no right to know the race of the people involved. Nowadays, you can't fill out an application for a movie ticket. Race, you know, and all the different categories, etc. It's everywhere. Every true man has a pride of race, and under appropriate circumstances, when the rights of others, his equals before the law, are not to be affected, it is his privilege to express such pride and to take such action based upon it as to him seems proper. But I deny that any legislative body or judicial tribunal may have regard to the race of citizens when the civil rights of those citizens are involved. Indeed, such legislation as that here in question is inconsistent not only with that equality of rights which pertains to citizenship, national and state, but with the personal liberty enjoyed by everyone within the United States. That's what Harlan said. Now, if you follow the Supreme Court, you know that quite often the dissent over a period of time becomes the majority opinion of the court. Now, if that had been the case, if Frankfurter and Philip Ellman had not committed judicial misconduct, ex parte communications, etc., and the court gone the way it did, we probably would have this rule from Plessy on the books, which basically said the government has to be colorblind. The government has no business knowing the race of any citizen for any purpose. And when you come to the course of the legislation, that can't be the proper subject. And that's exactly where we are now, right now. And that's why we're having so much trouble in our country, because instead of being colorblind, our government now embraces identity politics, critical race theory, Antifa, Robert Underwood, the whole thing. And it's not going to lead to a healthy society. I don't know how we're ever going to get out of it, because I see it going farther and farther and deeper until it's all identities and tribes. So I don't think our president's going to be much help either, causing me once again to say, let's go, Brandon.
Is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Approaching the 2 million mark. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The number of refugees fleeing Ukraine in the 2 weeks since the Russian invasion began. Russian shelling Monday reaching the outskirts of Kiev, convincing more residents of the capital it's time to go.
Amid increased Russian flights over the city, raising fears an all-out assault will come shortly. And scattered artillery fire, which Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky claims is directly targeting civilians. Many residents escaping on foot, carrying white flags to signify they pose no threat to Russian forces.
Fox's Trey Yingst in Kiev. President Zelensky defiantly announcing he is still in his office in the capital, isn't leaving, and isn't afraid of anyone, but warned NATO countries they could be Putin's next targets. More U.S. troops are being deployed to Europe.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin ordered an additional 500 U.S. troops to Europe, KC-135 refueling tankers, and air defense systems to Poland and Romania. There are now 100,000 U.S. personnel, U.S. forces deployed to Europe.
Fox's Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon. Press Secretary Jen Psaki says they're holding internal discussions at the White House about the possibility of banning imports of Russian oil, but still no decision.
According to the White House, the U.S. is exploring its options. But that could mean increasing oil imports from places like Venezuela, Iran, and Saudi Arabia.
Fox's Kevin Corke in Washington. Crude oil trading above $122 a barrel as the average price of a gallon of gasoline reached $4.06 Monday in the United States, according to the AAA. A judge today will question one of the jurors who convicted former Jeffrey Epstein confidant Ghislaine Maxwell of sex trafficking. He was the victim of sexual abuse, but checked no on the juror's questionnaire about that topic. The defense says the juror was biased against Maxwell and tainted the jury, so the verdict should be thrown out. America is listening to Fox News.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network, the Fox News Rundown, a contrast of perspectives you won't hear anywhere else. Your daily dose of news twice a day, going far beyond the headlines, tapping into the massive reporting resources of Fox News to provide a full picture of the news of the day.
I'm Dana Perino.
I'm Brett Baer.
I'm Maria